So this trending story is based around the fact that Dallas-Fort Worth just became the first North American airport to be declared carbon neutral. And so I wanted to explore for a second, where did carbon neutrality come from? What does it mean today? What are the issues to be thinking about in the context of carbon neutrality? And to do that, let me go ahead and jump over to this slide here, sort of laying out a bit of the conversation, and let you take a look at these for a second, and then I'll switch over to another camera. The idea of carbon neutrality dates back quite a ways. In fact, I did the first carbon neutral company back in 1996, which was Stonyfield Farm. And the carbon neutrality can be a great way of encouraging corporate learning about climate change, because if you want to think about carbon neutrality, you have to think about footprints, you have to think about where are our emissions headed, you have to think about lots of different things. So the exercise of carbon neutrality can be very useful in terms of bringing companies up sort of the climate change learning curve in general. But that doesn't necessarily have to happen, but it can be an important aspect of the issue. Now, in terms of carbon neutrality today, this example of Dallas-Fort Worth is one example, but there are many other sports teams, companies, airline flights. I mean, there are lots of different things that are going carbon neutral, so to speak, or that are claiming carbon neutrality. And so you can dig more into the airport accreditation one, and I'll show you some of those links in just a minute. One of the key issues is that hopefully with carbon neutrality, you really are looking at the footprint, you really are trying to figure out how to reduce emissions as much as possible. But if you take a look at this particular story with the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, you'll see that they've done a lot of great things on energy efficiency, but at the end of the day, very hard for an airport to get its energy consumption down to zero or anywhere close to zero. And so a lot of companies, when they're talking about carbon neutrality, end up playing or relying really on the idea of either renewable energy on the one hand or carbon offsets on the other hand to really pull that carbon neutrality together. And I'm not really going to go into a huge amount of discussion here. There's a digging in video on carbon offsets and a digging in video on renewable energy certificates just below, which I'd encourage you to take a look at. But that's the real vulnerability of a lot of carbon neutrality things. Hopefully they're doing a lot of teaching, a lot of educating, but at the end of the day, if the renewable energy that you're purchasing isn't real, or if the carbon offsets that are being purchased for carbon neutral claims aren't real, that's an issue. And it's an issue in terms of environmental integrity. It's an issue in terms of potential brand risk, et cetera, if somebody ends up coming after you for those claims. So those are the things to really keep in mind on this issue. Now, you can dig into this a lot more in the Climate Web, and I'm just going to show you here where to do it. First of all, there's the digging in offsets video. If you click on this thought, you'll be able to watch that video. There's the digging in RECs, renewable energy certificates video. I would particularly urge you to take a look at that in the context of a lot of these carbon neutral claims. But you can also take a look at our aviation sector deep dive, all sorts of aviation sector information, our carbon offsets and RECs deep dives, tons of information there if you want to go into this in more detail. And our index entry for carbon neutrality. We don't have a deep dive per se for carbon neutrality, but we do have an index entry that pulls together a bunch of different stories and the literature and organizations involved with carbon neutrality. So there's a lot of additional background material there, and if you have questions that aren't answered or you're interested in more information then give us a call. We're happy to talk to you about that and help you sort out what might make the most sense if you're looking at carbon neutrality options or trying to investigate carbon neutrality options.